Alright, so now we want to move on to the next part, which is the Jumbotron, or the main showcase area. So we'll go back to our HTML, and we're going to start right under the closing nav tag. And let's see, we're going to start a div with the class of Jumbotron. And in the final drafts or your project files, you might have comments at the end of every ending div, just so you know what the beginning div is. But I'm not going to do that now because it's going to take too long. So you might see that in your version of the code. So inside the Jumbotron, we're going to create a container. So we want to do div class equals container, and the container just gives us, for instance here, if we don't have a container, it's going to go across the whole screen. We want it centered in the middle, so that's what the container does. Within the container, we're going to do a grid. Alright, so we're going to do, let me just show you in the final. So this is going to be a grid here. We're going to do 4 columns. Well, it's going to be offset 4 columns, and then we're going to have, this is 8 columns. Alright, so if you remember from one of the earlier sections, we looked at the grids a little bit. Let's go back to CSS and grid system right here. So you can see here's a column here with 8, a div with 8 columns and then 4 columns. And then we can offset by using this syntax here, this offset. So that's what we're going to do. So first we got to create a row. And in that row, I'm sorry, I said 8 and 4. It's actually going to be 7. It's going to be 5. We're going to offset at 5 and then have a 7 column div. Alright, so let's do div class equals call dash md dash 7, and then we want a space and we want to offset this by 5. So we're going to do call dash md dash offset 5. Alright, so that'll give us an offset of 5 here, and then we want a 7 column div, which will put this stuff in. And I'm going to do one more div, and I'm going to call this Jumbotron content. And now we can add in the h1 tag. Clean and clear HTML5 template. And we want a paragraph, and we're going to use a class called lead, and that just pretty much makes the text a little bigger. And let me just paste in my text. One second. Alright, so that's it. That's all that's going to go in the Jumbotron, is going to be this h1 tag and this paragraph tag. So if we save that now, take a look, you can see we pretty much have it except for the background image. And we also want to get rid of this margin up here. So we do that in our CSS. So let's do class of Jumbotron, and this is basically going to overwrite any Jumbotron styling that's in the bootstrap.css file. So we're going to give it a background. The background is going to be a URL, and it's going to be images slash water drop dot JPEG, and that's going to be no repeat, and we want 50% and 0. Alright, and we want a height of 350, and then padding is going to be 0. Okay, so if we look at that, we have our background image. Still got to get rid of this, and the text is way too big, this H1, and it's also needs to be white. And then finally we need that background, this clear background. And for the background, I'm actually going to paste it in because it's kind of long. Alright, so what we're doing here is we're getting inside of the Jumbotron class, we want anything that's where the class starts with COL. Okay, so if we go back, and that's going to be right here, it's going to be this div. So this div is what's going to get that background. Alright, you can see the background, we're actually using RGBA here for our colors, and we also have our border. Alright, so it's overflow is going to be auto, and that's going to be also 350. That should be the same size as this. So let's save that. Okay, so now we get that background. A couple more things to do. I'm going to say Jumbotron content is going to be white. And then finally, we want to minimize that H1 a little bit. That's going to be 34. Okay. Alright, now that's not white. Let me just Jumbotron content. Oh, I forgot the R. Alright. Looks good. Oh, I do want the H1 tag to have an underline as well. Let's see. Border bottom solid 1 pixel. And let's add a little bottom padding. Alright, that looks good. Alright, so now I want to take care of this here, this padding. And I'm not sure which class this is from, so I'm going to open up my web developer tools in Chrome, and I'm going to check it out. Let's see. Jumbotron, margin bottom. Okay, so it's the nav bar. Has a margin bottom of 20 pixels, so we want to change that. So under top bar, let's say nav bar, and we actually have a few things we need to do with the nav bar still. Margin bottom 0. Okay. Actually, I'm going to do 1 pixel just to have just a little bit of separation there. Alright. Alright, so I'm going to add a couple more things to the nav bar. I want a hover effect when I hover over these links. So let's say nav bar li hover. I should have did this in the last section, but it's just a little bit of code. Alright, so now we get that hover effect. Alright, so that top part of the website is complete. Next we'll be getting into the boxes, and we'll be dealing with the grid system a little more.